Assalamu alaikum, week 6. So today we'll be discussing about the development of data collection instrument. So in the last week, we actually discussed about the conceptual and theoretical framework. So when we decide that what are the variable, input variable or the outcome variable that we will maybe using in our research, maybe in a qualitative or quantitative. So then actually we need to decide that we are going for a data collection and how and what type of data that we need to be collecting. So this week we will be talking about the development of a data collection instrument, maybe a qualitative or maybe a quantitative type of data that we are looking for. The learning objective that we like to cover today, the difference between the qualitative and quantitative data, know the data sources, the qualitative and quantitative method of data collection, and what we need to keep in mind while we are designing our instrument for the data collection. So first of all, we need to understand that for any kind of research, we need a data for empirically or theoretically to establish something. So normally we are dealing with the qualitative or quantitative data. Or maybe sometime we call a mixed kind of study design where qualitative and quantitative both kind of data can be. But simplicity, there is a qualitative data or maybe there are quantitative data. So qualitative data, so what we are having the objective in mind, that we are willing to ascertain the meaning, not the statistical inferences, that we are actually more interested in getting the meaning, why, how people are doing, and exploring the attitude, behavior, and experiences through methods such as interview or focus. So the primary method is interview or the focus group, and the objective is developing meaning. Another kind of the data that we are going to have, that is quantitative data, where we are actually looking for statistics or inferences to make rather than meaning. So it means our primary objective that we must have the data that establish something, giving in sense of inference. So that actually we can get by the large scale survey, and these questionnaire or structure interview are the method by which we can collect it. So it means in a qualitative data, the purpose is to understand, to extract the meaning and about attitude, behavior, or experience of the people. And the normal method for the data collection, that is active interview or focus group. But in quantitative data, that the objective is to infer the meaning out of the numbers or the data. So quantitative data, normally we collect the data with the large scale survey, and the method of the data collection are questionnaire or structure interview. So it means the interview, that is like the semi-structure or loosely designed interview, that is a qualitative tool for the data collection in a qualitative study, and a structure interview that is more appropriately utilizing the qualitative studies or the collecting the quantitative data. So here we need to understand what kind of data that we are going to collect, qualitative data or quantitative data, according to our conceptual or the theoretical framework and the variable or the concept that we are utilizing. So it means that we need to keep in mind the objective, that what kind of data that we are going to collect. It may be qualitative, it may be quantitative, or it may be mixed, where we may be going for a quantitative first or qualitative later on, or maybe any kind of scheme that may be qualitative first or quantitative later. So it is an objective that we need to keep in mind, that what kind of data we are going to collect and what kind of objective that we have to accomplish. So the data sources that normally we deal in research, that is primary data or the secondary data. So when we are actually developing the data or contacting the primary source to get the data, that is called a primary data. So secondary data that someone else collected and that is available to us, so we can utilize and it become a secondary data to us. Like a primary data, a survey is done and you collect, you design an instrument, then you collect the data, so it become a primary data. And there are certain issues that we need to keep in mind while actually designing, collecting, reporting, analyzing the primary data. The secondary data, which is collected by a third party, like maybe a big research organization or maybe a researcher, and they collect with another purpose in mind, and that is the data is available publicly, or maybe you borrow that data from them with the permission, and you utilize this data for your own research. So the primary objective of the data collection is different than your own research, but you are actually utilizing because the data suits you and it actually reflects what you are like to answer the research question at your hand. So primary data is actually when we collect the data with our own purpose and we develop the instrument, and that instrument is actually developed for our specific research objective. A secondary data, that data that is collected by a third party, any organization or a researcher, and this data is available and they have a different objective at hand while they are collecting the data. But still, the secondary data is a fundamental and the biggest source of the research writing. So many people actually look for secondary data. So secondary data is considered to be more worthwhile. And again, sometimes because the big organization like World Bank or the Global Entrepreneurial Monitor and the other global agencies that are collecting the data, so that is actually becoming a secondary data, and many people are actually utilizing it. The issues that we keep in mind while the data is there, maybe a primary source data or a secondary source data. Reliability of the data. So whatever the data that you have, it is worthwhile to use the data is accurate or not. Can we rely the number or the data that is there? It is reliable, it is worthwhile or not. Like maybe a researcher, unknown independent researcher maybe have the data, but we need to keep in mind how the data is collected and how they actually and from where they collect the data, what are their method of data collection, as well as sampling technique and what data they have. Similarly, for the other organization like research organization, World Bank, or the other agencies, United Nations agencies, so these agencies actually provide the protocol as well as the technique of the data collection, so it provides the reliability of the data. So similarly, if we are designing the data collection instrument, so then we need to keep in mind the reliability, that how the questions are formed and how the question items that are formed are actually with a source, or we actually develop these question items and how much reliable they are. Another issue that we need to keep in mind, suitability of the data. So mostly when we are actually taking the secondary source data, how data is suitable. What kind of variable are the research questions that we are probing or looking into, and how the data that is available from a secondary source is suitable to answer the research question that we are pursuing. So reliability and suitability are the two of the issues that we need to keep in mind while actually answering or developing an answer to the question that from where we are going to source the data. Adequacy of the data. So in many issues, in many ways, the data that is available or data that we are collecting is not adequate. Adequate maybe in number, maybe the dimension, or maybe the accuracy is not enough to actually create adequacy. So data must be adequate. Like let's say in a statistical technique, so there are certain limitations that the data must be having the minimum sample size, a minimum number of the data that needs to be available so that we can conduct some kind of the analysis. So reliability, suitability, and adequacy of the data must be there. Another issue that we need to keep in mind, like assess. So many of the time the data is available, but we need to take a permission, as well as sometime we need to transform the data to answer or to actually utilize in our research project or research to answer research question. So these kind of issues are there that we need to keep in mind, and certainly, mostly it relates to the secondary source of data. But keep in mind when we are developing the protocol or the scale for the data collection, so we must actually utilize the established scale. And there are two terminology that quite frequently utilize: adopt and adapt. So adopt means that we take the question item from the scale, from the source, as it many of time we need to change or alter it, so it becomes adapt. So in a both way, we must provide the source as well as the reliability and validity that is reported by the uh, authors or the researcher who actually developed. So it's very important that we must be having a reliable data, suitable as well as adequacy of data. Uh, Similarly, when we are actually developing the protocol or the instrument for the data collection, so in a quantitative method, so normal method that we have, that is survey. So survey can be done by the four type or four way. That is personal interview, that is actually semi-structure or structure interview, mail survey. So personal interview, that actually we develop the questions, having sometimes the answer as well available, and then actually we ask one by one from our interviewee or our respondent so that they can actually reply face to face. Right now, it can be done with the online. A mail survey that normally done with a pen and paper. So a survey is developed and then actually mailed to the respondent when you have the address or the contact of the respondent is available, and you actually send them and they actually fill it in their own time and return it. Telephone survey, it's old tradition, but again still relevant. That many people actually call the respondent on the telephone line after having a proper time and the permission to take part in the survey. But again, the issue is that it is a limited time. Maybe the person is not available, and the person that willing to reply, they are actually not available on a certain time. Another type of the survey that is actually online internet survey that is quite famous right now. That we are developing the survey online with the Google application or Survey Monkey. So these are actually becoming quite useful instrument by use of the technology. And we actually send the survey online by email or maybe providing a link so that the data they provide or they give the response and the minimum or the descriptive analysis can be done online. So these are four different methods of the data collection in a survey: personal interview, mail survey, telephone survey, or online internet survey. So right now, the online survey is quite famous, but again, there are reporting standards that we need to follow. Like you can say, what is the IP, what is the timeline, and how much time they answer. And similarly, the other issues that we need to keep in mind that they must be answering in uh, appropriate time. In a qualitative data, so normal method that we utilize in-depth interview, where actually we ask the detailed answer and detailed elaboration are provided by the respondent. So it is actually a semi-structure or ill-structured interview where narrative kind of issues are discussed and the more detail are provided by the respondent. And that create a debate. So maybe afterward, or you can say follow-up question can be asked by the respondent. A focus group where few people, maybe 5 to 10 or 12 people, sit together and they actually ask a relevant question and they reply one by one. So again, we need to keep in mind that how to manage focus group and actually what kind of the issues they are discussed and how these people are relevant to sit in one focus group. Another technique that is qualitative, that is projective technique. So actually, we ask them to answer one thing and we actually project that what is the meaning of it. It is actually quite minimally utilized technique, but mostly in qualitative that we go for. in-depth interview focus group. There are observational method as well, where actually sometimes we are actually utilizing the direct observation, and normally we are actually sitting as a distance at a distance to actually look for the people how they behave and what they are doing. So actually have unobstructive observation. But there are certain ethical issues that we need to keep in mind. So again, in our qualitative or quantitative method that what I discussed right now, actually we need to take a permission and we need to inform the respondent they are under observation or we are looking for their data to provide and we are actually looking for their permission to take part in the data collection method. Things to keep in mind when we are actually developing any instrument, maybe qualitative or quantitative. So define the population. So we must understand what are the people that we are looking information from. So it means a larger population that in mind, and then actually we can actually have the sample out of this population. Maybe not defined in a number, but again we need to have an understanding that what is the population that we are going to collect the data from. The language. Again, in all the research that we are dependent on the language, so it's quite suggesting handy that we utilize the same language that is understandable by the respondent and the interview. So it may be in English language or maybe a local language if people are more comfortable, so that we must utilize the language that is more people are comfortable with. Decide what to ask, that is very important. That the question language, the fundamental or the instrument that we use must be understandable. But normally when we ask the question, so there are close-ended question and open. Close-ended question, again, everyone know that the answer is already there and they need to just pick the option or the answer that they feel. Maybe yes, no, or Likert kind of scale, or maybe multiple different balance, unbalanced scale. So this can be utilized in close-ended question. In open-ended question, it means there is no option available and we are looking for a appropriate detailed answer. So the people can actually narrate their experience and narrate their issue and actually openly describe the phenomena, what they undergo, and maybe they like to add anything to it. So these are about asking the question. So developing the language and then actually ask the appropriate question, whether close-ended or open-ended. Uh, it is actually what I learned during the course of my research journey that we must have an introduction or a brief about the questionnaire or the instrument. It means instruction. So it must be a one page, a cover letter, or maybe a direction or the instruction that must be provided so that the people understand why the data is collected and why this research protocol comes to them and what is the purpose and how the response they are providing will be. Right now, it become an ethical requirement as well that the respondent must have understanding. They can decline as well, take part in the survey. Journal appearance of the protocol that normally you can say in a quantitative study where the scales are there. So it must be look good and professional. In an interview, maybe normally we don't have a protocol in a semi-structured interview. Maybe having few questions at hand, but in a normal survey, so it quite have to have an appearance so that it can give a welcoming impression on the respondent. Consent of the participant, as I told, it becomes mandatory right now that the consent form, or maybe in term of a signature, or something like I accept to take part in the survey, it must be there so that they can sign, or maybe they actually give a consent in terms of maybe taking some in online. So consent of participation is becoming a quite important ethical issue so that we need to keep in mind and actually add in our protocol or in the survey. Wording of each question, it must be important that the question must not be double barreled. Maybe one question pertaining to one specific aspect. It may not be misleading. It may not be giving rise to another question, and it must be asking a very focused question so that have one reply. Because if it is not done, so the respondent may be misled and he answers something that what he understood. So that's why wording of each question is very important. It may not be double barrel, it's very straightforward and understandable, and it must be in a language that is understandable by the. And sometimes, again, you can say it's a benefit of the survey face to face interview as well. So you can actually provide exact meaning of a question, but that is we missed when we are having the mail survey. Survey. So that these are some of the issues. So that's why in normal skill development we need to keep in mind the language and the each wording of the question statement. Other thing that we need to keep in mind sequence of questions. So we must start with the simple question or straightforward question at first, and then actually we may ask the critical or more maybe more lengthy question, uh, sometimes called a rapport development between the researcher and the respondent. So when this kind of relationship or trust build, so then actually we can ask the critical or more difficult question or demanding question later on, not at first stage. So that's why giving a brief, taking the consent, and building the confidence and trust, and then actually you ask the questions that are more relevant and more critical, sequence wise. First, go for an easy one, then go for a difficult. Length of a questionnaire, that is a very important topic. Many people ask about it. That how many questions item must be there. A normal rule of thumb that how much time you want to give if you are fulfilling you are filling this question here. So normal time that what we think that maybe 10 to 15 minutes is enough to actually answer pen and paper or maybe online question here. So it means a rough idea that is 100 to 20, 100 to 50 question maximum with your profile question is considered to be a length of the question. So it means 15 minutes. So it means if you have 120, 150 questions, so it means that respondent may be able to answer uh, 2 to 3 or 4 questions per. Ease of recording that when we are developing a protocol, so we need to keep in mind how to record. Certainly when there someone is replying, maybe on a pen or paper, maybe you can say I interview, how we can very easy in a pen and paper. So where actually a paper is there, so the respondent is actually ticking so that you can actually record. But keep in mind when we are having an interview, semi-structured interview or ill-structured interview. So you must actually have some method of the tool of recording, like maybe a video, audio recording, or maybe a note taking. So it must be arranged beforehand so that you actually can have the data collected by recording. So in a pen and paper or maybe online, it's very easy, but on the interview, we need to actually make the arrangement for coding. So normally when we develop the survey, so we already code that what are the variable, what are their name, or the coding name and number, so that they cannot X. Because in a quantitative analysis, sometimes we need to drop the item so that we understand which items from which variable we are dropping. So that's why coding is very. And coding may not be mixed. Our coding may be able to differentiate between the variables and they not be close to. So when we are developing the protocol, so we must keep in mind the analysis, that what kind of analysis we are going to perform. It may be qualitative or quantitative. So we must actually answer, we must ask the question in a way that actually help us in an analysis. And with open-ended questions, so normally when we are ending, so we must actually end with open-ended questions so that if they like to say, if they like to comment, if they like to add something, so they can. Another important thing, a word of thanks. So we must actually thank our respondent for his or her precious time, as well as we need to promise maybe to keep them informed about the outcome of this survey or the research that we are pursuing. So many people, maybe not all, but many people are interested that what will be the outcome of this study and how and where the outcome of the study will be reported in a term of a paper or maybe a report. So we actually can promise them that the report must be handed over if they are interested, so they can give an email. So these are some of the things that we need to keep in mind while we are designing our research protocol, for mostly for survey, as well as for recording. Keep in mind our interview or survey. So both way we need to keep in mind how to record and can utilize later on stage. So whatever we are asking, so we need to keep in mind the validity of the question or the question item that we are actually putting in a survey, maybe in a term of an interview or a survey. So content validity, that what we are asking, it's appropriate to ask, and it actually have the same kind of meaning from the literature. The face validity, that it look right to ask the question in a way that is we are. So in upfront, that it look valid to ask the question, and it actually reflects that it has purposefully have given the same kind of meaning to the people asking and answering. Criterion, it means it provides the same outcome that what we are looking for in earlier studies. So it means the criterion validity must. So construct validity, it means it have a variable, so that variable giving rise to the same meaning in the literature and in the work. So these kind of the validity issues that can be resolved on the four criteria, that's content, base, criterion, and the construct validity. So the last thing, when actually we have our protocol in terms of a survey or interview, so maybe we need to plan for the field work, or maybe we are going for ourselves for the data collection. Sometimes we have a team for the data collection, so we need to keep in mind a plan. So pre-testing is the first thing. Like you can say, when we are actually having a scale or maybe interview, so we need to actually pre-test the question that we are willing to ask. So these questions may be having a different meaning when actually we utilize. So pre-testing actually help us to validate it before. So pre-testing is very important. So field work planning actually start with the pre-testing, then actually work plan. How much time and the effort and the survey or the number of the respondent we are looking to have and how we can have. Like maybe in a survey, we are looking for 400 sample to be answering. So how we can divide the 400 in maybe 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months time. And similarly, another issue that is the timeline. That how much people we have, so how much time we have. So we need to actually work out a plan based on the time. And certainly the cost is also an issue. So sometimes we have the money available for the data collection, or maybe external agency for the data collection. So we need to keep in mind the work plan and time. Another issue that is sampling. Because firstly, I think we must keep in mind the population. So certainly we are unable to contact each and every one of the population. So must be having some reasonable sample. So these sample must be some way represented. It may be a probability or non-probability sampling, but we need to keep in mind that we need to actually justify our sampling design. So maybe not confuse that only the probability sampling is more acceptable. Still, a non-probability sampling is still acceptable, but we need to justify that why non-probability sampling, purposive sampling that is mostly utilized right now in social science. So how we purposefully select the sample, contact the sample, and qualify sample to be asked. So these kind of issues that we need to plan. and plan well at hand. And certainly we need to report at the. So I will be discussing about the analysis and reporting of the research design in a week. So we must actually report as well. So pre-testing, the work plan, timeline, the sampling. So these are part of the our paper writing as well, the method section. So sometime when we are actually going for projects, so the data collection requires the field worker. So many of time we need to train them. We need to make them comfortable with the protocol or the instrument they are going for, and to utilize it to collect the data. So the workforce training is very important. Certainly, sometimes as a respondent, we have many questions that certainly they like to be answered. So these field workers must be able to answer these questions. They must be trained in a manner like I told you, what is the purpose, why you are assembled, what will be the outcome, when the report will be coming, how the data can be utilized, how the anonymity or you can say the identification of the sample can be protected, and acceptance or the consent form, the ethical issue, the approval from the board or the ethics committee, and similarly, the respondent, how they will be informed later on about the outcome. So these are some of the issues that the people who are helping us to collect the data, they must be. Otherwise, if we're going for an online survey, so we must actually go for the best practices for the data collection online. But keep in mind that we must inform, we must take the consent, and we must ask the question in a language that is understandable, and don't utilize confusing or jargons or misleading statements that can actually distort respondent to reply in a so normally, these are some of the things that we need to keep in mind while designing the survey protocol. But keep in mind that if you are utilizing the scale from the established or published sources, so we must acknowledge them. And if time is available or is the best practices, actually, we need to take a permission from these sources or the scholar who actually established or actually use these sources or these protocols to collect the data. Permission is quite a good thing, but again, not mandatory. But if you take, so you must actually narrate in your report writing or in paper that you actually take permission. Otherwise, we can actually justify that we actually change and we adapt the questionnaire or scale, and we actually change the certain item. But in a reporting, we must actually report how much and which question item that we change or narrate or add, sometimes drop. So these issues must be there, must be reported, and it helps to actually justify our research design and the instrument that we are using for the action. And similarly, for the qualitative study, whatever the protocol or the question item that we utilize in a question in an interview, so we must report that. So the last thing that mostly when I actually write or publish the paper, so we actually provide all the question item in the research article. It helps to establish a validity as well as a reliability in the mind of the reviewer that we are not disclosing, we are disclosing fully everything and we are not withholding any information that may actually distort the decision to accept or not. So it means try to fully disclose all the research design from the sample, questionnaire design, the data collection, and anything that relate that how we actually design. So this is all for the today. So actually we discuss about today the questionnaire and the instrument development for the data collection, and we actually able to cover the difference between qualitative and the quantitative data, the data sources, qualitative and quantitative method of data collection, and what we need to keep in mind while instrument development stage. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. So I'm here for the next 5 minutes. Thank you, everyone. Keep with us for this session. So as there is no question coming forward, so I think so we can close. Okay, so thank you, everyone. That's all for the day, and inshallah we meet next with another topic that relate to the data analysis and its reporting. So thank you. That's all. Assalamu alaikum, and have a good day ahead of you.